And so we can disseminate it later with the minutes and everything like that. So we can have it recorded for posterity like the other ones. First things first, welcome everyone. This has been a completely bonkers year. Hopefully this session will prove to be useful for everybody. And I know that we're still kind of doing these things in this virtual world, but hopefully we will all get back to it. Fall is looking the most likely time that people are going to be starting to go back to work. But I just want to thank everybody for attending, all the presenters who are going to present, Ben and his team for putting this together, all of you providers and regional stakeholders for attending and for doing the hard work every single day to try and keep your companies and vanpooling as a mode up and running in an extremely challenging set of circumstances. We appreciate every one of you, and hopefully you guys appreciate the stuff that we do. Very briefly, I just want to give an overview of this is one of our 3 councils that we have at OmniRide. A part of our strategic plan is to have our mobility councils, of which this is one of 3. We also have an employer council and a Hispanic council. The idea being that we can garner feedback from the community and then use that to help influence our policy as we go forward. An excellent example of that would be this particular committee and our commuter choice applications, which you'll hear about later. So we really do appreciate your guys' actual involvement and actual things come out of these. It's not just lip service. We are legitimately interested in your opinions. So I hope everyone has a great session today. Please do not be shy about asking questions in the chat or whatever. And thank you so much. And I'll hand it back to Ben.
All right, thanks, Joe. So I know most of you, but I don't know all of you. So this is kind of my first, chance to say hi. I'm Ben Matters. I used to work at Vanpool Alliance under Joe many moons ago. I moved over to OmniRide on the planning side, and recently Joe did kind of the same thing and moved over to the OmniRide side. And so I came back to Vanpool Alliance. So glad to meet you guys. Glad to be at Vanpool Alliance again. So today I'm going to give you guys a brief update on the program, and then you'll be able to hear from Chris Arabia from DRPT, Nick Ramphos from COG, Brian Lambert from DOD, and Dan Goldfarb from MDTC. And they're going to have good, interesting stuff to share with you, much more interesting than the stuff that I have out to share with you. All right, share screen. Can everyone see the virtual Vanpool Council, April 21st?
It's coming through great.
Okay, great. All right, so let's jump into it. So I'll give you a brief overview of where we're at, and we'll go from there. All right. So building back. So right now, typically, we're reporting about 35,000 passenger ships per month. Our peak was about 143,000. Albeit that was our peak, would go down to 130,000, sometimes 125,000, depending on how many commute days we had in that month, how many holidays, and sometimes, as you guys well know, sometimes you guys forget to do your ridership reports, so we don't have as much to report. Our ridership levels have bounced back a little quicker than other modes, that being metro rail or bus service. We're about 50% of our pre-pandemic levels, which for vanpooling nationally is quite good. I was on the ACT Vanpool Council meeting in March, hearing from places like King County, Houston, LA, Orange County, and a lot of them have only rebounded about 25%. So us being at 50% is kind of a testament to how strong vanpooling is in this region. In that meeting too, it was kind of interesting. There were some vanpool places that hadn't lost a single van. They'd had actually increased vans. And those are in like random places like South Dakota, where they're doing meat packing, or other places where they're doing all these essential tasks, and the van pools really serve as the only way to get lots of people in and out of big facilities. So us being here more around defense industry, government, white collar labor, a lot more people are able to work from home. So, us being at 50% pre-pandemic levels, I'm quite chuffed about. So our building back numbers, peak enrollment, we had about 670 vans in the program. We currently have 415 in the program. Give or take, each month we've been paying around 300 of those vans. A lot of people are still doing the reports to stay active in our system, even though they don't have the required ridership. So we appreciate you guys doing that. Unfortunately, the feds have said you need that 50% ridership capacity to be counted. So it's not really us making that arbitrary designation, it's the FTA. We've continued to offer our ride matching services. We had several vendors reach out saying, hey, I'm losing one of my members. Can you see if XYZ would work? So we continue to do that. We have virtual transit fairs. We've had one at Navy Yards. We're doing this workshop here. And then really what we've done is increase our cash flow out to you guys. So went from $200 to $300 in partnership with DRPT. We've went and made 3 rounds of ever payments. We've got 1 more on the way. We hope that that's been a helpful thing for you guys getting the direct payment. And so Vanpool Alliance has also applied for several grants through Commuter Choice that would help offset parking and operation costs. And I'll get into that in this next slide. So there's 2 pots of money. There's the I-66 Commuter Choice and there's the I-395 Commuter Choice. This is all run and operated primarily by NVTC. The program supports projects that move more people through those corridors. So when we apply for projects to get grants from them, it has to have a direct benefit to the toll payer. Vanpooling obviously has a direct payment or a direct benefit to toll payers and taking more SOVs off the road. So we had gotten feedback from one of the other virtual Vanpool councils to try and offset parking costs in the DMNet Washington downtown corridor in Arlington. So we took that feedback and we went to the I-66 Commuter Choice and applied for new vans entering the program. You'd get $200, up to $200 per month to offset those parking costs. We got that approved, and to make it in line with our 395 grant cycle, we've held off on making that program live until July. For the I-395 Commuter Choice, we have 2 grants in. They have been recommended. They haven't been approved yet, but we're hopeful that they will get approved. So basically, if your van traverses the 395 corridor, you'll get an additional $400 per month on top of the $300 that you qualify for. And you'd also be eligible for up to $200 for a parking benefit, giving you access to almost $900 if you're going through the I-395 corridor. That program as well wouldn't go live until July 2021. So yeah, we hope that this will be a nice shot in the arm to get vans back on the road. We're not going to be super punitive with what a new Vanpool is. So it's not going to look like what Vanpool VA did. So basically, if we haven't interacted with these folks in our program for 90 days, you'd be considered a new program participant and you'd be eligible for these programs. Before I move on from that, does anyone have any questions on that?
And if you do, you'll need to unmute yourself because you're all muted.
All right, I'll keep her moving. So we also have a mobile reporting app, or not app, we have a mobile reporting web portal that we've developed with our TripSpark partners. So that hasn't gone live yet, but it basically will allow you to use your mobile phone to do your reporting. Instead of it being that kind of monthly view, it'd be a daily view. So you do your ridership per day. The old system is still going to exist, so there's no worries about if you're a larger owner operator who does like 40 to 60 reports every month, you won't need to do each and every report through your mobile thing. That old way of reporting will still exist. When we do roll that out, we have a tutorial video that's quite nice that we got done by our marketing partner, Siddle. And we also have a written instructions that Bonnie put together. She did a really good job. So once that's ready to go, we'll be in contact. But just keep in mind, if you don't like the mobile app, you don't need to use it. The old stuff that you're used to completely exists. You'll be able to use it going forward, so no worries there. All right, so this is my contact info. I did want to give a shout out to this survey here. I'll be sending you the PowerPoint presentations tomorrow afternoon. Please take the time to do this. This is to share your thoughts about transit enhancements from Fairfax and Prince William County. It's put on by DRPT, and I'm sure they'd be very happy for your feedback if you want to give it. Any questions for me? All right, hearing none, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and kick it over to Mr. Chris Arabia.
All right, thank you, Ben. Thanks for inviting me to your council meeting. Glad to be here. First, I'm going to just start off with a little bit about DRPT, because I'm not sure everyone knows what our agency does. So again, my name is Chris Arabia. I'm the manager of statewide commuter programs for the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. That's DRPT. And we are one of 6 transportation agencies in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We were one of the smaller ones, so you probably know the large ones like VDOT and Department of Motor Vehicles. We are one of them. So, but our mission is about moving more people in the Commonwealth. So moving more people on the roads that VDOT built, and getting people onto rail and public transportation in all of its forms, including vanpooling. One of the things that we do is we provide grant funding for a lot of different things that we do. We are not, as you well aware, we are not one of those states. Some states operate their own Vanpool as a transit service. So they own and operate the vans, just like a bus transit company does. We don't obviously do that in Virginia, but we do provide some grant funding out to transit agencies and to other agencies like PRTC to operate commuter assistance programs, and also to provide some assistance to vanpooling. Vanpooling is a very important priority for DRPT and the Commonwealth. Prior to the pandemic, we had just completed a study on looking at how we can expand vanpooling in other areas other than the I-95 corridor. We had a nice plan there, and then COVID hit, and that put everything on hold. But we are ready to pick that up again. When the pandemic hit, we looked at our grant programs, and some of the parameters that we use for assistance to vanpooling were funding for starting new vanpools, or even saving, what we call van save, an existing vanpool. If someone, if one day or within a week, 3 people dropped out of your van, rather than raising everyone's rates, folks like PRTC could use our grants to provide some seat assistance for those empty seats. So when the pandemic hit, we kind of took a look at things, and we relaxed some of the rules. There are typically ridership requirements. To start a van, you got to be at least half full before you can get some financial assistance. We don't want to start carpools off as in vans. And then also saving the vans too. We want to make sure that you've got some ridership in there, but we relaxed some of those rules to give folks some assistance. Obviously back then, I think it was March when we were talking about this, it may have gone into effect April, and we were all very much missed the mark on how long this pandemic would last. I'm sure like you were when we were all sent home to work from home. We were all thinking a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. It didn't happen. So we've kept those kind of relaxed rules for vanpooling, the financial assistance in place. One of the things we did not enforce was typically if anyone uses our grant funding to provide assistance to vanpools for empty seats, that vanpool has to actively go out and try to get some riders so that we don't have to, because that funding's only going to be around for a few months. We relaxed that obviously because of the pandemic. We didn't want people to be forced into situations where they couldn't keep the social distancing. We felt like that would pretty much fly in the face of the CDC guidance and of course the governor's guidance. So those rules have been relaxed and they're still been relaxed. One of the things that did affect some of the stuff we had working with VDOT on the I-66 Express Lanes project, we did suspend the incentives for vanpooling for that same reason of not trying to force people into vehicles just to get funding, just to get some money from us when social distancing couldn't be maintained. So like all of us, we are looking at, what do we do now? What is vanpooling going to look like after, hopefully the governor just announced relaxing some rules starting in May. So this is a good sign and we're headed in the right direction and hopefully we don't go backwards and we keep going that direction. But, we're all looking into our crystal balls and going, what does this mean for transportation? What does it mean for transit? What does it mean for teleworking? What does it mean for vanpooling? And like I said, we are very much a supporter of vanpooling and we rely on the experts like Ben and Joe to tell us what we need to do to fund this, but we also, certainly would love to hear from you folks too on what we need to do. So, we have funding available. Our funding cycle goes through an annual cycle. It is closed right now. It will start back up December of 2021 of this year, and it will end February of 2022. And then, we're accepting applications from folks like PRTC, but also we've opened up one of our grant programs to actual vanpool companies. So if you're thinking about that, sometimes, and again, we did that recently just to kind of see if not to take away anything that folks like Joe and Ben are doing. We want to keep those in place, but if there's other things that we can do that would be effective, we certainly want to do that. So I know it's been kind of a cliche. I think if you watch the television show New Amsterdam, the main doctor there has this saying he says all the time, and I'm going to borrow his saying, and I'm going to go, how can we help? Because that's really where we are right now. We don't know what's going on with vanpooling and how it's coming back. I think it was Ben or Joe mentioned, the FTA has not changed the rules on what constitutes vanpool. I do not think they are going to do that. So what does that mean for us? And how do we help? Is the future of vanpooling no longer, big, large vans with 9 or 10 people or even 7 people? We don't know, but if that's the case, then we certainly want to move more people and fewer vehicles. And so there is a role for us to play in assisting that. So that's hopefully gives you an insight on my agency, DRPT, and what we could do and how we help. And certainly through Ben and Joe, or if you want to contact me directly, Ben can send out my information to the group, to the council. I'd be glad to hear from anybody who's got some ideas of how we can keep Vanpool going and how we can keep Vanpool successful in the post-pandemic era. So thanks for your time.
Hi, this is Sharon Arrington from Cool Runnings. And as you were talking, I'm not sure if your information, I'm sorry, I suspect your information is going to be available from Joe Stansley. But one thing that I am thinking, I'm a small Vanpool owner. My van's old 7 passengers, and normally I have 6 or 5. And I'm looking post-pandemic, and I know for sure that I'm going to need another van because I do not want to stick 6 people in a van. You see what I'm saying? So now the most I'm going to want to put in a van is 4 person. So I'm thinking, as I said, post-pandemic, now I got to buy another van just to accommodate my riders. Mm-hmm. So I hope that is in your planning as far as assisting us companies to do that, because you already have the riders with post-pandemic. No one wants to be in a van with 6 people or 7.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a very good point. And we've heard that too, that, some vans may have split into 2 vans because of that, having fewer people in the vans, and that is fine. And that's the kind of thing we want to know. Is that the trend? Is that the lasting trend it's going to be? And so we have to adjust our accordingly. Now, 4 people in a vehicle, we like that. That's a lot better than 1 person in the vehicle. So we want to help that too. So that's good information for us. Thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And I will say that we also, I think we did it either in July or August, and then we did an update when FTA updated some of the requirements for mandated mask wearing on transit. We have a guidance document for vanpooling and carpooling in transit on how people can do that successfully and safely. And we were always kind of looking at that. Obviously, we weren't really working with everyone teleworking, promoting ride the bus or carpool or transit, or vanpooling, because so many people were teleworking. But we did want that message to go out to people that we understand a lot of folks, even during the pandemic, were essential workers. They still had to work. Some of them were still taking their vans, even though there were fewer people riding. Even some of the bus service, had some much lower ridership, but some riders because they had to. And we just wanted to make sure everyone knows, how to be safe and felt comfortable with that. And that reminded me of something. We recently received an FTA grant from their, I think it's a transit recovery program, where we will be working on developing and helping the transit agencies do a service recovery plan, but also working on a marketing plan to bring back transit riders. And in the scoping of it all, I was able to include vanpooling in that. We often think about vanpooling as an extension of transit, going where transit buses don't go, the longer commutes, serving more, going into neighborhoods where buses don't go. So that will be coming out probably early summer, that marketing. And so as a state agency, we are going to be doing a big push to bring back transit riders, to make them feel comfortable about being safe in a vehicle, but also that marketing will also include vanpooling. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Thank you. That is good. Very good. Thank you.
And I'll just very quickly jump in and say Chris is far too modest to talk about it, but I guess I'm not, so I will. Is this DRPT, the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, is a government agency, and we are typically not known for being super nimble and responsive. And the last 12 months, 16, 18 months, 10 years, whatever this pandemic has been, have given an opportunity for us to kind of pivot. And so any vendor on the phone that has received any money from Vanpool VA or has received any EVRA payments or anything like that, that's because of DRPT. And those funds were not originally necessarily, in many cases, designed to be spent that way. And so retasking grant funds is something that DRPT worked very closely with us to do, and to help minimize the impact to you guys as much as possible, to give you as much of that breathing room as humanly possible to be able to make whatever business decisions you need to make. We are eternally thankful to DRPT for doing that. Oftentimes vanpooling can be somewhat the redheaded stepchild and gets left out of a lot of the mix of these types of things. And so we really appreciate the time that they took to do this with the original 2 rounds of the EVRA payments and these subsequent ones. And it is no small potatoes that we were able to get this across the finish line. So we're just extremely appreciative of that fact.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris, is James Davenport. I think I know the answer to this question, but do you foresee with the governor relieving the restrictions in May, as you mentioned, that we might be able to start promoting the Vanpool incentive on I-66 outside the Beltway?
That's a very good question. I'm going to have to regroup with VDOT on that to see. I know they're still have, I think, another year of construction there. So we'll have to say, yeah, it's quite possible that that, you know, we can come back to providing those incentives. I will say that I will have to talk to our legal staff because they were the ones who first jumped in and said, wait a minute, if we're providing an incentive to get into a vehicle where they're not going to be 6 feet apart, you know, we live in a litigation society, and
Right.
we didn't want someone getting sick and then blaming us. So it's a good question, though. I think we do have to look at when is the right time for that, and we will be having those conversations with VDOT. But thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, Chris. Tracy Bell with BCS Vanpool.
Hi.
Hi, sir. Thank you very much for this briefing, and thanks to everyone online, especially got Ben and Joe and all of them, Denise and all of them, and Bonnie. Do a good job up there helping us out. You guys are really keeping us running. I just got one question about the HOV lanes. Since COVID, I got hit with a lot of HOV violations, and sometimes the drivers would not change it to HOV 3 from 3 to 2, and I still got charged. I told them you got to put it on 2 if less. Take it off HOV 3. I'm just curious what the state is doing for Vanpools regarding HOVs. You know, the buses, of course, they get on there with no charge because they're a bus, but we're left with that other cost that can be quite expensive sometimes. I'm just wondering how the state thought about the Vanpools. And, you know, I'm registered with the state of Virginia as well with the county of Stafford, and my business is recognized there. So I think one of the things to do is to make sure they're registered with the state and the county, and recognize them as a Vanpool transportation company. And maybe they can recognize that these fees are being charged because of COVID, and that we're trying to keep the van running because we're hoping they come back, you know. So I'm just curious to know if the state have decided about eliminating some of the fees for the Vanpools and HOV.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know it's easy to forget switching that little switch, right? The transit vehicles are obviously easier to spot, and we know that they're a bus. We don't always know that a Vanpool is a Vanpool. The idea of having some type of registry where vehicles could get registered could be something for discussion, so that you didn't, necessarily need to do that. So I will certainly talk to my VDOT counterparts about something like that, and see if they're willing to entertain the thought or do a pilot. We are looking at things to make it easier to ride those express lanes, and certainly I think for Virginia, we're very fortunate that we have those partnerships with those express lane toll operators. That part of that agreement will allow HOV 3+ to ride free. Obviously, you've got to flip the switch, but that is something that a lot of states do not have, and so we're very fortunate with that. And so enforcement of that can be expensive. It's a lot of work to do that. And if we can make it easier to where you guys can ride those lanes for free when you meet the HOV 3+ requirement, we're all ears to figure out how to do that. So I will definitely take that to VDOT and talk. And yes, Joe or Ben will send my contact information out to this group. So if you want to contact me directly, we can have a chat.
She will. And
Okay.
by the way, I forgot to give an atta girl to Holly too. So hello, Holly.
Well, and Tracy, I mean, that I hadn't considered that. I think that's a great point, because of course this is something that up until the pandemic was largely a non-factor, of course, because now you might well have a Vanpool that averages 50% capacity over the course of the month and is scraping it, but on certain days they're going to be below that threshold, and that is no doubt when you're getting dinged. I suspect, obviously, as Chris said, that this is something that's going to would involve more than one state agency, but it seems like a perfectly reasonable question to me. So I think that it's something we'll look into. I like the idea.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm kind of dismissing it, but yes, DRPT does not control the enforcement and the rules on the express lanes. but we know who does, so we can talk to them.
Certainly with the alternative work schedules we're going to be seeing in the future, I would think that there might be some hay to be made here. In the interest of time, I'm going to move to our second speaker, Nick Ramphos, who is the head of COG. So I'll share my screen and I'll get your slide deck up. Okay, Nick?
Okay, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Nick Ramphos. I'm the director of the Commuter Connections program at the Council of Governments in Washington, D.C. And some of you may know about Commuter Connections. We do regional ride matching for Vanpools, Carpools. We also have some incentive programs, including our Guaranteed Ride Home program, as well as a Vanpool rewards program called Pool Rewards. And that's for vans that are originating in the District of Columbia or in Maryland. And we've certainly have seen a huge drop in those vans, as well as the need to relax some of the rules, despite the fact that FTA hasn't changed those rules. So we recognize that there is a need to do that. We've worked with our the Vanpool providers on some of the CARES funding just to make sure that that it was available for those vans that went off the road when the pandemic hit. We also do research. We do a Vanpool driver survey every couple of years, and I know some of you have participated in that. And that really kind of gives us a bird's eye view of what's going on with vanpooling in the region, because it is an important component of our transportation infrastructure, and that's the way we view that, along with all of the other modes that are available in the region. So I'd like to just kind of go through some slides. And Ben had asked me to kind of just talk a little bit about what's happening with commuting trends. We've done as I mentioned, we do research, so we've done some studies over the last year. And we can go. Do I have control of this, or are you controlling this?
Controlling it. So you want me to go next one?
Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So we did a couple surveys. One was with employers back in June, and what we found is that more than half of the work sites are looking at a fairly substantial post-pandemic telework level that's going to be higher than what we had at the pre-pandemic level. Pre-pandemic level, we had about 35 to 37% of the workforce working about a day and a half a week. But as the pandemic took hold, and we asked employers, what do you foresee in the future? And about 20% said, yeah, we're going to continue at the current rate. And many of those employers even said, yeah, we're shuttering our work sites, and we're just basically telling people, you could work from anywhere. We also had about 37% of employers said, yeah, we're going to continue with telework, but it's probably going to be some type of a hybrid situation where a lot of employees will be putting in more hours in telework than they were previous to the pandemic. We'll go to the next slide. Those employers also considered implementing flexible staggered work hours, as well as compressed work week schedules. And this is really to help reduce any future virus outbreaks at the work site. So they're looking at this as the recovery takes hold, they want to have some type of a system where employees are only going to come in certain days of the week, or have different schedules than typical. There was also some employers interested in starting some type of a shuttle or bus pool or van pool in that survey. Okay, we can go to the next slide. We also then talked to people that are in our database. We have about 30,000 commuters that are in our database, and we do what's called the placement rate survey every 3 years. And we conducted this survey back in the November-December timeframe. And so we asked, one of the questions we asked what's your likelihood of teleworking after the pandemic? And more than half of those respondents said that they would be doing some telework after the pandemic ends, and about 7% said it'll be full time, and about half expected to split their time between home and their main work site. Go to the next slide. And then we looked at, how telework accounted for in the weekly commute trips. And then bottom line is that 1 in 10 of those trips are going to be made by driving alone, and 15% will be made by other modes besides telework. And as you can see, telework is really the one mode that the majority of the survey respondents said they were going to be using. And then when we look at train, bus, vanpool, and carpool, those percentages are much lower. You can go to the next slide. We also looked at what telework looked like before the pandemic and during the pandemic. And as you could see, 72% of the respondents worked full-time at the time of the survey. And, before the pandemic started, it was only 8%. So that's a huge, it's not surprising, but it's a huge increase compared to, when you look at if anybody ever teleworked previous, it was only 27%, and then 11% during the pandemic. So that even went down. Okay, next slide. We also conducted most recently a retention rate survey back in December, January timeframe. And this is of users of past account holders who are no longer active. And we had a pretty high response rate on this. And so we asked folks, what is your likely way that you're going to be getting around after the pandemic? And we had a lot of folks saying, yeah, we're going to be driving. So it really went up to 48%. And then there's a 3% for taxi ride hail. And then if you look at the pre-pandemic mode use for that group, it was only about 39%. So a bit of a jump there. And then I think the rest of the modes are pretty close to what they were pre-pandemic. So that's kind of a good sign. Now, when I'm giving you all these numbers, as you could see, back in June, employers were saying one thing, and then as we got closer to the November, December timeframe, our placement rate folks were still kind of hedging. And then we talked to the retention rate folks. These are past account holders. And so there's a slightly different number here, because I think right around December, January, as we were conducting the survey, the vaccine came out. So I think people's perceptions changed a little bit. So this is kind of a little bit of a rosier sign, I think, for the alternative modes. So as you can see, because there's not a huge difference when you look at pre-pandemic versus what's happening. Right, what people are suggesting is going to happen after the pandemic. And so one of the things to consider, and one of the things, and I talked to some of our traffic modelers here. One of the things that's happened is that our traffic rate right now is around just north of 80% of what it was pre-pandemic. And when you look at that, the huge difference is a lot of that traffic is happening throughout the day. So there's not a concentrated effort around the peak hour time frame. I think people are just traveling. Because a lot of people are working from home, there's just travel that's happening morning, noon, and night. So I guess the one concern everybody, and it's on everyone's mind, is, okay, as recovery starts, we want to make sure that people know that they have options. Because if everybody, you see this drive alone rate, if everybody starts doing that as their office opens because they don't want to really share a ride, that's going to really put a lot of burden on our infrastructure as things reopen. So we can go to the next slide. We on our website, we have what's called Commute with Confidence, and we've been promoting all along safe commuting tips and things that are out there, policies that are out there, things that Chris had talked about earlier, and these are all related to the pandemic. You can go to the next slide. In terms of the content, we have local reopening policies, the safety guidelines that are out, what transit companies or agencies are, how they're responding to the pandemic. And then, of course, all of our additional resources like Guaranteed Ride Home and ride matching for carpools and vanpools. Because there are essential workers, there are people who do travel in every day. And so we have those guidelines out. And then we also have information for employers. And then if folks are considering using e-scooters or bike share, that information is there as well. You can go to the next slide. So this is my last slide. We have some upcoming activities. We are very supportive of vanpooling through Commuter Connections. So one of the things that we're working on is a regional recovery outreach campaign. And we're starting the beginnings of that. We want to encourage individuals to look at their transit, vanpool, carpool options. And even those folks that are going to be teleworking in that hybrid situation, if they're planning to go in 1 or 2 days a week or 3 days, we want them to consider what their options are and not just hop in their car and drive by themselves. We've talked with the Vanpool operators, as well as folks like Ben and Joe regarding flexible vanpooling. We have a mobile app called Carpool Now, and it allows for real-time ride matching. We want to adopt that for vanpools to use and for vanpool operators to use. So if you have some openings in your van and you're looking for that extra person, we want to make that available. It's not going to be available tomorrow, but it is on our radar screen, and we've started work on that with our software development team. We're also looking to upgrade our user interface for Vanpool groups and information in our regional ride matching database. And we're looking at things like creating the ability to create and manage multiple Vanpools under one account. We know that that's been an issue in the past. And we're looking at updating our Vanpool symbology on our match letters and exploring Vanpool priority rankings. And then we're also looking to change some of the text to include Vanpool interests of those matches. And then giving some quick tips for successful vanpooling. We're in this. We want to see this succeed. As I mentioned earlier, it's a big part of our travel options, and anything we could do to help the cause. And if there's ideas folks have, we're open for that. And you can go to the last slide. Okay, I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if folks have questions afterwards, you feel free to reach out to us.
Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about that flexible vanpooling idea?
I guess, does anybody have any concerns with that? Is one of my questions. It's something that we've pitched to some groups that were interested. We're also looking at payment options to allow for payment through that portal. So it would go right to the operator. And maybe at some point we would also look at the possibility of integrating smart benefits into that as well. I know but that'll be further out. I don't think that'll happen right away. But
hey, Nick,
if anyone's I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Joe. Do you want to give a very quick 30-second definition of the flexible vanpooling thing? Because I think it's entirely possible we have some people who just don't know what that term means.
Okay, so the way that would work is, for instance, if you were traveling and you knew, okay, I'm in a 15 passenger van, and today I only have, 5 people in, but I could really use some extra passengers. What it will do is it'll allow you to connect with other riders dynamically that are looking to maybe just get a quick trip in or even out from work, from home to work or from work to home. So it'll allow you to connect with that individual, and one of the things that we've set up is We have what are called pickup points. And these are really where these are staging centers like at park and ride lots where, there might be slugs or other folks that would be interested in carpooling. And so it would allow you to basically go to that location and pick these passengers up, or perhaps depending on what the route is, it would allow folks to instantaneously connect with these individuals who would be interested. And then it will also allow for them to pay for that ride automatically through the app. So this is a mobile app that would be made available, and it would work on any tablet or smart device that would allow you to participate in the program. Obviously, we'd have to work with all of the operators to get the appropriate information into the app, and depending and we're sure that everyone's probably going to have a little different spin on where they can pick up and what their payment policies are and whatnot. But we would want to work directly with the Vanpool operators, and of course we work through organizations like PRTC and others to make sure that this is something that's going to be viable. Does that answer the question?
I'd say that was an extremely thorough answer. So
Okay.
Just for everybody, this is where this is all going, right? I mean, there's an element of van pooling, which will always be the standard group of people, month in, month out. It's regular as clockwork. It is what it is. But for a certain percentage of people, certain providers, they might need to be in a situation because they have a reduced occupancy level where they need to pick up a person here, there, or they want that additional flexibility. And the type of stuff that Nick is talking about and that they're working towards is, I think, an excellent tool. So if people, are interested in that, we will certainly keep you guys appraised of it as we go forward here, because I do think that it's just another part of the Swiss Army knife of the success of keeping you guys on the road and keeping more people in your vans. So if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. You don't have to do it, but for somebody else, it might work. So I think it is definitely something to keep an eye on. And that's really is where the appification of thing, the real-time ride sharing, that's where all of this stuff is going. So that's where it's at.
This is Andy.
And
Norton.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
One quick question on that. With the reports on a monthly basis, we have the regular riders. Now, when we have a flexible rider coming in, we have a new name who's not in the registry, and we've got to report him or her as a rider on that day. That may be a little twist in there that you kind of have to look at as to how we can keep our records, and report them properly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Andy, you're definitely right there. I mean, if for those of you who've been with us a while, you may remember we did have this temporary rider feature that we piloted a number of years ago. I think it was back with Ben's first stint with the program. And how can I put it? I'll put it nicely. It was used in an inappropriate fashion by certain people, and so we took it away. But this is something that we're going to have to grapple with as an industry, because right now, we need to be able to prove to the FDA that Janet Smith is Janet Smith and Mark Riley is Mark Riley and this, that, and the other. And if you're just taking someone on a daily basis, you may not know that individual's name. So it's like, okay, is that okay? And that person is then just excluded from whatever NTD reporting on, so they're irrelevant? Or do we have to be able to work it so that you can just, yes, this person was definitely on the van, but you don't have any traceability as to who there are? So certainly, Andy, that is a really valid point. And that's one of the many things that we're going to be working through on this.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that for anyone to use this app, they will have to register with us. So if it's a rider, we would have to have all of their contact information, because we're very familiar with NTD reporting ourselves. And so in order to make it valid, we would be able to run some type of a report that would actually supply that information back to the operator, so that you would know these are the folks that used your van. And depending on how often you would need that, we would have to work with those operators to make sure that you're getting the appropriate information when you need it.
I would envision it might be something that you actually send us, Nick, because we're the ones validating the data. So yeah, I mean, there will be a solution. It's just kind of thinking about how we get to that. But it was a very good point, Andy.
So
Yeah,
quick question, this is Yolanda Norman Moore. So how would this affect our insurance? Would it? I'm just asking, I don't know. I'm just asking that question. Would it affect our insurance rates?
I think Lee is on the call.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Miss Anderson, care to jump in?
I'm here. Hi. I don't foresee that increasing the insurance rates because we insure for the van to be full. So of course, if something happens to where the actuaries say we need to change it, then we will. But right now, I don't see where that would increase the rates at all, because as it stands now, you're insured if you pick up a slug. So.
Oh, well, there you go.
They just can't ride the van. They can't be a driver. They have to be solely a passenger.
Correct. Good point.
Yeah, so just the last thing I'm going to say is that just looking at all these trends, we know that things are not going to be pre-pandemic anytime real soon. So this could last for a while. So we want to do anything we can to support, shared ride alternatives, whether it's carpooling, vanpooling, or any type of transit use. So this is, one thing that, we're moving forward on so that we could help revive whatever we can in order to allow individuals to have those options. So we are looking for feedback. So if you have more feedback, feel free to reach out to, Joe or Ben or us. And we're more than happy to. And of course, there'll be a pilot phase. So we're going to be asking people to test all of this. So if you're interested in that, let us know as well, or let Ben or Joe know, so that we have a good cadre of folks that can give feedback to us, because we just don't want to put this out there and not get folks using it. We want to make sure that it's going to make sense.
Yeah, we'll definitely be in your guys' inbox when there's stuff to share about this. We'll move on from Nick. Thank you for that. And next up will be Brian Lambert from DoD.
All right. Good evening, all. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Excellent. Yeah, my name is Brian Lambert. I work for the Department of Defense. I manage the Mass Transportation Benefit Program. My colleague, Mr. Hugh McGloin, should be online as well, I believe, and I may defer to him. So depending on questions, he manages the Transportation Management Program Office for the Pentagon, and I manage the Mass Transportation Benefit Program, which you're probably familiar with, as we provide smart benefits to DoD employees for mass transit use, which definitely includes Vanpools. So I recognize several of the names on this call as people that I've worked with in the past, and several new names as well. So I'm happy to meet you, and I'm definitely open for questions at the end of this presentation, as well as after. My contact information, Ben, please feel free to share that, and I'm happy to work with people on questions about commuter subsidy as well as transportation. So, all right, next slide, please. Here's a quick overview of what I'll be discussing. This is a DoD trend right here with the agenda slide. Next slide, please. All right, what we do and why, and what do I mean by the word we there? So I work for Washington Headquarters Services, which is a field activity of the Department of Defense. So everybody's familiar with Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, the military branches, but there's also a whole bunch of field activities and defense agencies that are specific in what they do. And Washington Headquarters Services kind of centralizes things that it makes sense to do as one agency within the National Capital Region. So within the Pentagon, you've got all the branches of the military and as well as the defense agencies. It makes sense to have one agency manage the parking, one agency manage the facilities, the electricity, that type of thing. So that is the group that we work for. And we do provide commuter subsidy to people within the National Capital Region. And there's lots of definitions for that term, but for commuter subsidy, that is Washington, D.C. and the immediately surrounding counties. So where it gets kind of odd is that does reach, I think, Fort Detrick, which is way out, but it doesn't reach Fort Meade, which is much closer just because that's how the county lines fall. So we do tend to speak with a focus on the Pentagon just because it is the biggest building with the most people going to it. But I do take care of all of the other locations around this region as well, as far as providing commuter subsidy to them. So Vanpools are a part of what we do. They're not the largest part. As you know, running a Vanpool in this region means there's lots of competition for those people who may be riding Metro Rail, Metro Bus, have other options to go with that. It's not like, I think we were talking South Dakota earlier, where a Vanpool is the only form of mass transit in many cases. So yeah, we will provide money to Vanpools, not to carpools. The difference between those two, I hope, is well understood by the people on this call. But we got the definition written out there about what is a commuter highway vehicle when it crosses that magical line from carpool to Vanpool. And therefore, for my purposes, those who pay to ride in that vehicle can use a tax-free commuter subsidy to pay for it. So this is an important distinction at the FDA as well as the IRS. So the program that I run had up to about 24,000 people in it. Pre-pandemic, we're down to about 18,000 enrolled right now. 2,000 of those were enrolled in Vanpools when we were at that 24,000. Now I'm down to about 1,200. That's not on the slide, but that's just enrollment. That's not people who are actually riding. Those are people who are still holding on to, I want to get back in this van when things get back to normal in most cases. Next slide. All right, so how do Vanpool companies work with us? And the simple answer for those who are familiar with how all this stuff works is we are a smart benefits user as an agency. We have one contract, and that is with you, Metro, to provide smart benefits. So if you were operating a Vanpool company and you want to start receiving money from DoD riders, you do need to register with smart benefits at WMATA in order to get your information. Register with them so that you can receive payments through smart benefits and smart trip cards. In addition to that, the Transportation Program Office that Hugh runs works with people to maintain a database. You know, who's running to our facilities there, depending on the MARC Center. So if somebody has a question, hey, I'm interested in vanpooling, where can I find out more? We are not going to favor any one provider. You know, we're going to refer to this database and let people go that way. And I'm generally very careful to not mix any sort of encouragement of services and the money piece of what we do. Once an employee has selected a vendor from the marketplace that they want to send money to, we will provide the money to the employee. And they'll use smart benefits to get that money out. And then we provide that information as requested. So it covers that. Our processes have not changed since we've gone into the pandemic as far as how we provide money to Vanpools. There are just fewer of them running right now. Next slide. All right, Vanpools and Parking. Now, this is a Pentagon specific slide. MARC Center is included in the Pentagon community. So if somebody says, hey, I need a Vanpool parking permit for my Vanpool, they're going to need 7 riders. Now, I know the IRS code can be more flexible than that. So I am with the commuter subsidy as well. If somebody reaches out to me and they reach the tax code, but they don't qualify for a Vanpool parking permit, I can still, get them subsidy for those riders that do qualify that work for the DoD. They just may not have the same parking access that they would have if they met the building's requirements. And these are specific to those 2 buildings. Navy Yard has its own lots that have their own parking requirements for what meets the Vanpool limit, as well as Walter Reed or any of the bases. So I don't want to speak for them and have you think this is DoD, but that is at least our largest parking lots are 7 riders. They don't all have to be employees, and only 4 of them do. And those 4 need to show up in the parking office in person in order to make that request so that they know that it's legitimate. Our parking office and our mass transit benefit program work together. So somebody who wanted to apply for commuter subsidy while they're holding a parking permit for the building, it will be denied, and the other way as well. Somebody's enrolled commuter subsidy, apply for a parking permit, it'll be denied. Unless the big exception is the Vanpool permit types. So, and then right now, this is a current COVID procedure. We're emphasizing safety over encouraging ride sharing at the moment. I know typically ride sharing is the more important priority, but right now safety and crowding, which has already been discussed here, is the priority. So if somebody were to come in and request a ride sharing type permit, the parking office would offer a clearance to everybody that needs to get into the building to do their work. So that they could come in just for the hours they need to be there, but they don't have to share a ride with others to do that. And that is temporary. That will not last. Once things get back to normal, that'll probably be one of the first things we turn off to try and control. But those who are receiving any sort of subsidies for commuting other than an SOV are not driving anymore. So.
Hey, Brian, this is Hugh. Thanks. I just want to interject one point here just for the community is we did not revoke any Vanpool parking permits based on occupancy over the last year. So I just want to make that clear. Knowing that some Vanpools saw a significant drop in the number of riders that actually participated in those Vanpools. We still do have Vanpools bringing folks in, and if they had a parking permit previously, they have one now, as well as most of those permits have been extended through the pandemic as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and it is our hope that these riders do come back. And I'm of the opinion that there's only so many parking spots, right? We have more people than parking spots, and the building was designed that way from the start. So we know that people are going to have to use something other than an SOB to get in, and they're probably going to be more comfortable traveling in with their neighbors than they are with strangers in a big train or on a bus. So I think vanpooling is in a good position to pick up faster than some of the other modes when things do start to pick back up and people go back to work. Next slide. All right, so these are challenges, observations, things that we have to work through. The first one is a classic one, especially when a commuter subsidy is involved. Enforcement of accurate pricing. Sometimes federal employees, when they apply for their commuter subsidy, they say, I get $270. And that's just not the way this works. So whatever you as a vendor are charging, that needs to be the same rate for all riders, whether they're federal employees or not. And then that employee needs to account for the correct price on their forms that they give to us. If it's over $270, that's fine. We still want that written on the form. We'll give up to their actual cost up to $270. But if the benefit were to increase again, like it can, $5 per year with inflation, we'll have that record correct at the start. But there have been serious problems with overpayments to Vanpools in the past, where if you're only charging $1,000 per month to a coordinator in kind of an enterprise model, but you got 10 riders who are collecting $270 a piece, right? You're getting a whole lot of money that isn't profit and needs to be returned to the government. So there's an education piece that the department or the federal government needs to have for their own employees. But any way that you can help us control that is appreciated, because I'm sure it's not easy to have to return money for people who don't do math all that well. So COVID-19 things that we're running into here, and this is related. Some people did not stop their payments to vendors when they stopped commuting. And so that money, if it's rolling in, is also not profit. It needs to be returned to the U.S. Treasury. How to do that is not well known. I've got a link here in the slide to the U.S. Department of Transportation Transerve office. Within that link, they have instructions for how you can transfer money electronically. You don't have to write paper checks. You don't have to mail them in. That money can be returned to the Treasury and documented there, and how you do that. And the Department of Defense, even though we are not a Transerve customer, I'm sure you know people with those Transerve debit cards, they are the belly button for all returns, including those who are not Transerve customers. So that's a good link. And then what's already been discussed here. So safety concerns during the pandemic. And that's really where this next slide is going to roll to. Next slide. So yeah, this is kind of safety and awareness for our people that we want to encourage best practices if they are still riding in a van, or when they do return back to a van, don't come in sick, have good hygiene. I know many Vanpool companies, we're providing kits to drivers to keep things clean. Just anything to make people comfortable. And I think as more and more people are getting the vaccine, we're going to see people coming back, and kind of the paranoia about keeping everything as clean as we have been may die down a little bit, but we still want to maintain good hygiene requirements. That was a good idea before the pandemic. I don't know how many of you haven't had a cold in the last year, but it's been kind of nice. And yeah, that concludes my slides. Hugh, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that's thanks, Brian. I mean, the only comment I have is as a user pre-pandemic of public transportation, and then as a single occupancy vehicle driver from South County and Fairfax to the Pentagon over the last year, I've just recently started transitioning back to the bus because the mainline traffic is just out of control. And so I think the traffic congestion will probably be the single most important driver of people moving back into different modes of transportation. Because it's just horrendous, the afternoon traffic coming south on 395, and I'm sure 66 is getting to be the same. And the tolls are steadily increasing on the hot lanes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Were there any questions for me from this group? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you
Yes,
for your
I
time.
have a question. I have a question. This is Yolanda Norman Moore. I'm with Leah Vanpool. So, and I think I saw it in your slide where you mentioned that, you know, we want to, safety obviously is a priority, but where we're, I think how you put it, splitting the folks, alternating who's coming in which day. My question for you is, does that modify if we have 3 people, let's say 4 people are coming in, right? But they're not coming in on any single day. They're toggling their hours. Does that mean if they say we're only coming into the office 2 days a week, so technically speaking, the amount in subsidy is cut in half, one could argue?
Correct. Yeah. So, and that's important. Right now, most Vanpool companies are charging a full month's ride, you know, regardless of whether or not you ride every single day. Where that comes in conflict with subsidy, and it was a phrase that I think was the name of a Senate hearing once, is are federal employees taking Uncle Sam for a ride? What they found in some of these investigations where people were paying Vanpools full price and never riding them, or riding in them 1 or 2 times a day, creating just tremendous waste. So what we tell our employees is that, you know, if you are a part-time rider, you may still have to pay full price, but we're only going to subsidize the days that you actually need. So you have to provide us a kind of an average number of days and come up with a prorated cost for how much of that is subsidy versus how much of that is out of pocket. But for you as a vendor, I think it's completely reasonable to expect full payment if that's the model that you use for all of your riders.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, and Brian, I think that, I mean, a lot of Vanpool companies have historically viewed their model as you buy that seat, right? If it's the same thing with, you know, if you get like a monthly pass or something like that for VRE or whatever, you're going to pay for that regardless of if you use it 10 times or 20 times or 30 times. And it's just, that's one of those things, you know, where it's a policy thing. And so if the stickiness of this is going to be a problem long term with increased, you know, telework and less frequencies and this, that, and the other, you know, of course, you know, you're in a position where you've got to make sure that the taxpayer is getting a good value, right? And, you know, you're working off those federal guidelines. And so this is where, you know, organizations like APTA and ACT, and, you know, they work with the FTA to kind of try and get some of these standards changed or modified, and they are not easy to do, and they take a long time. But just to let all the vendors know on the phone, you know, we do work with those. You know, Holly's heavily involved with ACT, so is Ben. I'm tangentially now, but, you know, so we do try and work with these people to get these kind of positive things changed when it's like, yeah, this would be a quality of life issue for a Vanpool company. So it's great to hear about these things so that we know that we can raise them when the time comes.
Excellent, thank you. And I saw that as a possible upside when we were talking about the kind of the flexible van pooling model. You know, that involves a per day charge. You know, that is something Vanpools traditionally have not done. And if there are enough riders to do that, you end up with without the need to sell every seat for a full month, and things could change possibly, and that may open up more people coming in. I do fear that kind of following a taxi model or an Uber model may open it up for bad actors to work in carpools or things like that. But overall, I see this as a positive, and it's definitely the direction that I believe society is going. You know, these apps and sharing quickly versus the neighborhood model is something we need to be prepared for.
Sure.
Does anyone have any more questions for Brian or Hugh? All right.
Thank you
both. All right. Last but not least is Mr. Dan Goldfarb from MVTC.
Ben, you have the slides. I guess you'll be moving the slides for me, or do I have control?
No, I'll be moving those slides for you.
Okay, excellent. So Yeah, I'm sure everyone's exhausted. So this is only going to be about 5 hours. No, like this. Okay, I think about 15 minutes we'll walk through this. I think a lot of the themes that we've heard up to now are kind of brought together, hopefully my presentation and the work we did here. Everyone constantly says, well, we don't know what's going on with COVID. We don't really have a crystal ball, but we do have some sophisticated mathematical models that we can run and get an idea about different scenarios that might happen. And that's kind of what we did at NVTC. We focused on transit. I do touch on HOV a little bit here, and Vanpool is, I think you can see that as almost a mode of transit. I think it falls more into that when we break out modes. So let me start with what's COVID-19. We've all kind of known what COVID-19 is throughout the year, but it's certainly a virus that has spread through our society and has caused changes in our transportation patterns. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the ski slope graphic. And what I'm really trying to let you know here is, like, when we look over the transit ridership for all of our providers in Northern Virginia for the last year, you see that just come April, there was a dramatic drop in ridership. I mean, just dramatic. So next slide, please. Okay, so what did we see? I mean, we saw transit drop rail by almost, what was it? VRE, 98% of its ridership dropped off in those peak April, May months of last year. Metro went down in Northern Virginia. These are all statistics or numbers for Northern Virginia. Metro went down by 96% and bus decreased by 80%. So we just saw an overwhelming drop in transit. But the thing that in the beginning of the year, when we started looking at numbers in January and February, we were all very excited because we were having a very good year of transit ridership. It was up from the year before due to some other events, government shutdown and stuff, but we were tracking much closer to the previous years. So next slide, please. Whoa, we went real fast.
What is going on here?
Wow, well, that's it. Okay, thanks, bye.
All right.
We're back to the telework slide, so you gotta keep going back. But these slides have no animation, so it should be pretty quick. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, this is like a total preview, so like the cat's out of the bag, huh? There we go, percent working at home. Okay, so what has driven our dramatic drop in transit ridership and Vanpool and cars on the road is people are teleworking. So if this slide kind of, Maryland and Virginia are at the state level, it was not broken out for the region. This is from a University of Maryland collects this data through their RIDIS center. But probably DC gives the best snapshot of what the suburbs are, what we're doing in the region. And in the peak, DC had about 55% of people were working from home. And now if we look at the decline in that, if we look at this month, it's about 42%. So you can see this decline, and that's declined the slowest compared to the others. And where Maryland was going from 43%, it's now 30%, and Virginia was about 40%, and now we're down to about 20%. You can see nationwide, it's lower. Nationwide, it was, what was it? I guess now Virginia's 25%. Nationwide, we went from 40 to 22%. And the peaks of when we were at our highest percent work at home was at different periods. For instance, New York was, if we looked at New York data, you would see that up in April. If we looked at California and Florida, they had a peak much later in October. And that's when their peak at stay at home was. But the fact is that until the lines decrease down to where closer to where they were 10, 20%, we're going to have lower ridership and lower use of our highway and transit facilities. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so this is transit altogether, and you can see that there's been a tremendous drop in transit. And if we look by the end of the year, transit was down 70%, with rail at 87%, and bus was down by 47%. Now, this comes up a lot. People say, well, you know, why are we focusing on commuter trips when we talk about transit? Commuter trips, although you travel for a lot of purposes in the day, and if you add up all those other purposes, they're more than commuter trips, but commuter trips are the longest distance and have the greatest impact on the transportation network. And a lot of times that's what we have to plan for because of that large impact. So if we go to the next slide, I kind of break out just bus, which bus, as you can see, has not taken the hits that rail take, because a lot of bus trips also are non-commuter trips as well as commuter trips. And what's interesting is that if we look at Saturday and Sunday ridership in the Washington region, that's only 20% down. But if we look at weekday, we're about 50% down right now. Next slide. Okay, so I just want to take a quick snapshot of what's happening on the highways. So I kind of looked at recent data for a link on I-95 near the mixing bowl on the inner loop, and that seemed to be a good sensor that was giving consistent data, and I could pull that off of the VDOT site. But if we look now, we're just about 10% lower on the daily traffic on that link than we were historically, if we're looking at that. But what's interesting is that if we go into, I looked at, so let's step away from the freeway and look at arterials. Arterials as a whole in Northern Virginia, your morning peak is about 25%, 25% down to historical data. But the midday is only about 5% down. And I think we heard that message in the DOD briefing about, right, getting to work. We're seeing more traffic out there and what's building on the roads. So we're certainly seeing that. And as it was mentioned previously, as we see highway volumes go up and congestion go up, that's going to force people from their SOV back into other alternative modes that are more HOV. So next slide, please. Okay. So what's the short-term outlook for transit in the region? Well, we're seeing upticks, which I mentioned, but with those upticks, what's very important is our providers are starting to put service back out there. So they're matching the service so that we have enough service out there to handle the demand. There might be some lag where, you know, most providers have more service out there than the demand at this point, but eventually we hope that comes to an equilibrium. Commuter trips are really going to drive these alternative modes and getting people out of SOV more so than the shorter non-work trips. So, but we wanted to get an idea of what in the future going forward, if different levels of telework were to hold, what would be the impact on transit for Northern Virginia? And with that, looking at HOV here, which is of interest to you guys. So next slide, please. Okay, so what we did was we took the regional model, which the Transportation Planning Board keeps up for the region, and we just did some sensitivity analysis where we focused on commuter trips, and we said, well, what happens if, you know, about 10% of the, or pre-pandemic, about 10% of the people telework on an average day in the week, right? 10% of the people are home. Okay, so we did a quick thing. It was an exercise where we focused on commuter trips. We said, what if 10% more? So that was right. What if 20% more? 30, 40, 50, 60. And then we did like 75, like the ultimate, like everything stops going, just to do a sensitivity analysis and try to figure out some trends. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so when we think of things in this model, we think of like why people travel and how much they travel, where they're going to travel, how they're going to travel, and what route they're going to travel. But for this study, what I really wanted to focus in, if we go to the next slide, is how people travel and what route they take. But what's important as I'm playing with how many people, what the demand is, right? Because of teleworking, I need to feed back into their choice of travel. So next slide, please. We wanted to feed back the effects so that we would capture the idea that, gee, if there's not congestion on the road, right, people are going to get in SOV. Well, as we load up SOV, people are going to go back into other modes. So we had this feedback loop that we ran within the modeling. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we did, we made one other key assumption in this analysis, and that was that if the data is split up into the trip rates, how people travel, how much they travel, is split up into 4 quartiles, right? And we assume that lowest quartile, which is about people making less than 50,000, inflation isn't that great, so we'll keep it at 50,000. These are about, I think, $27, $10 values, but for the most part, think of it as 50,000. Most of those jobs are service sector jobs, and those people don't have the option to telework. So we held their trips constant. We didn't put the telework percentages on those trips. So that part of the trip table stayed the same. but we let all the other income quartiles who probably have more options to telework to be impacted by the different percents of telework. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to quickly look at was the vehicle miles traveled. How much are the vehicles on the road? And what happens as we start to increase our telework percentages? And this, of course, kind of makes sense, and we would expect this, that your freeways and your collector roads, right, they're going to go down, but your major arterials, like a Route 50 or Route 1, they're not going to change as much, because at some point your destination is probably going to be on a major arterial. Most of your destinations, your work destinations, your shopping destinations, they're not right off a freeway. You have to get off the freeway and get on another road, right? Very rarely do you have a direct freeway ramp into Potomac Mills Mall. It's close, but not right directly in there, right? As an example. And the other thing is the collector roads, which are really like feed from the neighborhood roads. You really don't have too many key destinations, maybe small shopping centers there, but most of it's on arterials. So even as you increase your telework percents, the demand on the arterials aren't going to decrease that much. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, but another thing that's kind of interesting is when we look at how much people are using freeways and how much they're using arterials, I just said that, right, that arterials are really the base. But as we get up really, really high, what's interesting is that freeways have traffic that's going to be on there, freight traffic, through traffic, that no matter how much we go down, freight is still moving. And we saw that in the beginning of the pandemic. There was a lot of trucks. You would notice that trucks were more in the midday instead of on the shoulders at nighttime because there wasn't traffic and they could use it. But we still have to move freight, right? Even if we're teleworking, we still need toilet paper. And we found that out in the beginning of the pandemic, how important those commodities are. So next slide, please. Okay, so when we think about mode choice, why people choose different modes, there's things that really matter, like in-vehicle time, right? How you relate to, does it feel the same as in a car, the fare, your income level. But what's important is parking cost, right? So if there's demand in a central business district area, parking costs are going to go up, and those types of things, right, can drive you to take transit, and it's all related to demand. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we went through this exercise, we saw very small shifts in transit demand, right, or in demand in total. But these small shifts in transit, for example, represented all of Fairfax County's daily ridership on buses. If we looked at those shifts. So even though they're very small, they are substantial shifts. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide I think is really interesting, especially for the Vanpool people. And I think this was a modeling exercise, but what Ben and Joe talked about, we're seeing play out here, which is that, as things change, right, the mode that changes the least is HOV, is your Vanpools. And that's what I think Joe or Ben mentioned in the beginning is you're seeing, more demand on your Vanpools than in other modes. And that's what we're seeing here is that, as the shift changes, right, the thing that changes the most is the car. And that's out there the most. But when the people who are able to telework are also wealthy enough to have the cars and they can shift from SOV to telework. But it's interesting that people feel that HOV, the shared ride, is a safe mode, I guess. And in the model, it's all on economics and time. There's no factor for safety. But it's interesting that in reality, people feel it's a safe mode, but the model also captured that here. So next slide, please. Okay, this is important for people like NVTC, where transit's really important to us. And what's interesting here is that, and it makes sense because most of the rail modes are commuter, the ridership is commuter based in Northern Virginia, is that as we increase telework, the rate of change is much more dramatic than it is for bus. And that's because bus is a cheaper mode and it serves people with a lot of service jobs, our frontline workers. And this was important for both NVTC and PRTC to realize that you needed some level of bus service out there because there are people that need to take the bus. They're transit dependent and they're not taking the rail into DC or for bigger jobs. They're working in Northern Virginia and bus is the mode that they take. So this was a key takeaway from this exercise, was the importance of bus as we plan for telework impacts from COVID. Next slide. Okay, so then we just wanted to do one other kind of quick sensitivity test here. And that was that if you're locked in a subway car underground, you might not feel as comfortable as if you're in a bus above ground because of COVID and ventilation. So what would happen if we made rail a little bit less attractive to take? And we did that by playing with the in-vehicle time. We made the rail in-vehicle and rail transfer time seem a little bit more painful, right? A little bit more, instead of a minute taking a minute, it would be like a minute takes a minute 30. And we just did this as a sensitivity test. So next slide, please. And it was kind of surprising because what we saw was that transit went down, right? But all of it didn't go in one, all of it just didn't jump on the highway, right? We got some people moving to HOV modes, and within transit, we've got a lot of people moving to rail, to VRE to get around, and a lot of people moving into bus to get around. So it just wasn't all, kind of the expectation was that it would all drop right into SOV, and that's not the case. People still see transit and HOV as viable modes, even when, right, you're feeling this constriction within the subway system. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think, in Nick's talk about their survey, I think the numbers are different, but the story kind of came out the same, that we probably can look forward to a teleworking that there's a small percent of people that are never going to do it, and there's a small percent of people that are always going to do it. But in the middle, we're going to have people doing, maybe frequently, right? That's 1 or 2 days, or people doing it maybe, or frequently being, 3-4 days a week, or maybe 2-3 days a week, and some people doing 1-2 days a week. And what's interesting about this is that I think as we see patterns develop, a lot of people like to telework on Monday and Fridays. So will that require our transit and our thinking about Vanpools to be really focused on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Will those become the peak of the peak that we plan for, where we have different days, where we have different number of Vanpools on Mondays and Fridays? And some of that is starting to take hold at this point. So that's kind of, when we look at this crystal ball, those are the types of things we want to think about as planners, at least in my role, as to how will we look at transit in the future. Instead of having weekday and Saturday, Sunday service, we might even have more disaggregated types of service. So that was my last slide. I think my contact information is on the next slide. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to entertain those now, or feel free to contact me directly. Thank you for letting me come and talk with you guys.
Thank you, Dan. That was great. Anyone have any questions for Dan? I think the thing that I get excited about is the fact that the HOV lane usage has been the least impacted. So, coming from Stafford, coming from Fredericksburg, coming from Front Royal, it kind of means you're either driving alone, which will not be viable long term, or you're going to get into a Vanpool because there's not really bus service that does those long haul type things up into the main urban core, which is good for the program, which is good for our operators.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that you guys mentioned that. And in our modeling, you can see the HOV kind of mode share is the one that changes the least, as we increase. So you guys validated my little exercise for me.
This is Yolanda Norman with Leah Vanpool. So I think that was great, and I really appreciated the depth of analysis that's going in looking at the impact of COVID, pre, post, and the trends. And for a question for the team here is to ask, because one of the things that I am paying a more attention to while we can track who is going in and out, is there is also trending with all of this is the federal agencies are actually moving away, or should I say, are much more now open to telework. And I'm seeing that in their recruitment. That is playing out a lot. I can tell you USDA has pretty much revamped its whole telework recruitment. Now they're just so even SESers are recruiting. That was unheard of before. So there's also a culture shift occurring in the federal environment that I think that is what I'm paying more attention to in terms of the viability of the Vanpool industry and what's going on in DC. Because what we're seeing is, and another part of it is these mobile work sites that are now popping up. But you probably see more in Stafford, that's occurring. But that's also another trend. So I am also looking at the habits in terms of, even after COVID, will people be making this trek into the office? Because what this has proven is that people can work at home and get the job done. You may not like it. So why do we need to move mass people into these center cores here? That's what I'm looking for. So it would be interesting to see how that layers on with some of the analysis that's going on, because I think that's what I'm looking towards in making some decision about this business here going forward.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Sharon. As a business owner, that's exactly how I'm looking at it also, because my office, every meeting we have, and we only used to telework 1 day per week. And now they're saying that people are doing so well by working from home that they're definitely not going to be, they're in no hurry to bring everyone back. And when they do, is no time soon, and it's not going to be the way it is. So as a business owner, that's another thing that I'm really looking down the road to see. That's going to have an effect on my business, a negative effect.
Yeah, I mean, of course. And I think that this is, the general consensus appears to be that, we may have potentially hit a high watermark in, January of 2020 or for transit usage, and certainly that would include vanpooling for some time, right? And no one knows how far out that's going to go. But if this is why we are looking to bring things like the flexible vanpooling thing, so you can have these opportunities. We do also have these opportunities, like at the end of next year, the I-66 facility will be coming online, which is obviously prime for vanpooling. And there are other opportunities as well. Mart's bus service just stopped running all of its commuter routes. I think that just happened a few weeks ago, right? And so there are, even within the overall shift in the public transportation here, there are opportunities for Vanpools to fill that niche. You're never going to get rail that goes everywhere, because it's like they build the tracks out of gold. It's that expensive. You're never going to get fixed route bus transit that goes everywhere. So if you're coming from Spotsylvania, Richmond, Newport News, York, Pennsylvania, Front Royal, Harpers Ferry, Leonardtown, Maryland, any and all of these places that we all have vans in the program right now that come from these places, vanpooling is always going to be the default mode that serves those things. Certainly, there are going to be more people that are teleworking, right? And I think that certainly certain federal agencies, civilian ones namely, are going to, I think, have a larger teleworking footprint than maybe other agencies have in the past. But we don't know how that's going to go. A prime example would be the Patent and Trademark Office in Alexandria, right? They used to have a huge telework program there because, people are patent clerks and this, that, and the other. And then they actually got too far away from it. They had a new administrator that came in and was like, actually, we feel like you guys are not effective working remotely. And so then that program was gone, and now it's building up again. So we don't know how things are going to work out. Certainly, Sharon, it's looking like there's going to be less people who are using public transit in general. But what I would take away from the slides that we've seen this evening, both that Nick presented and that Dan presented, is that the stickiness of vanpooling seems to be certainly much better than it does with potentially with other modes of transit, because you do have that, that bubble, that social pod, right? That people are going to be much more likely to get into a vanpool than potentially they would do with other modes. And so, we will work with you guys as best as we can through things like the flexible vanpooling things, through working with the FTA on these regs and this, that, and the other, to try and keep make vanpooling as dynamic as it can be, and so that it can continue to either just grow its share of a pie that doesn't grow, or ideally to grow the entire pie. But certainly I'm not going to sit here and say that, we think that the amount of people taking public transit is just going to bounce right back to what it was before, because I think that would be indulging in just, fairy tale land. But we will try to be your good partners in this process. And as everybody knows on this call, there are less vanpool companies operating in the Commonwealth of Virginia now than there were before the pandemic, right? And that's just a reality. And so, we know that this is going to be a challenging time, and I think that certainly there are operators who are going to look at the business decisions that they need to make and think, okay, well, if we need to do this daily, that doesn't give me the price predictability that I need, and my business model only works if I can have 12 people in a 15-passenger van or something like that. And there may well be people who select themselves out of being able to do that, and that's just a hard reality. But whatever form it takes going forwards, I firmly believe that vanpooling is going to continue to be a viable method of transportation. And we'll work with you guys to make sure that we can support you as much as we can in so that you're here to see that new reality, whatever that is.
Yeah, hey Joe, Tracy here. Like for instance, my company, all of my riders are essential employees, and I've got one or two vans that are, well, one van that's 4 with essential employees. But back to the flex thing there, I know my riders. I've been riding a vanpool for 20-something years. I've been running this company for about 13 years. They're a very unique group of people, right? Riders, and they sometimes they kind of shy away on having strangers in the van with them. Even new riders, it takes them a while to get adjusted to them. I've got numerous complaints with new riders. That's one of the cons on the flex schedule, but there's pros as well. So I just want to add that piece in there.
Sure. The pickled herring person, right? I think with the flexible vanpooling, it would definitely be an opt-in thing versus you're just automatically signed up. So vanpools that are keen to that maybe have been, I've heard from vanpool operators saying that, like, yeah, a lot of the days my vanpool has to go into the slug lines to be HOT, legal to get up to DC. Okay, this is a different way to then just running into the slug line. From what I've heard colloquially, slug lines aren't a thing right now. So certainly not out of like where I work down in Woodbridge, the Horner Road lot, there's no slug lines that I've seen. And I think Joe and Morello can back that up. But, I don't know, there might be more of a slug culture further down south just because of the long haul nature. But I would assume that it's not as good. So maybe this flexible vanpooling, app allows riders, it allows you guys to make money off of empty seats, 1, and 2, maybe that person who casually takes your vanpool is like, this isn't that bad, I might want to do this permanently, right? It's a way to maybe show, give people a test run of what it is to vanpool. Maybe that upfront cost, I don't know each and every one of your models, but I know a lot of you charge per month. Maybe that kind of day usage opens their eyes and they're like, I think I want to get into vanpooling. Someone who's worked in transit for a long time, one of the biggest obstacles to people riding the bus. How do I pay for the bus? How do I get on the bus? And that sounds like such a small thing, right? But, you know, Vanpooling has the same thing. How do I get on a Vanpool? Like, how do I sort out this smart benefits thing that I don't know about? Because you know, using me, I'm from northern Wisconsin, and such a thing doesn't exist in a city of 2,000 people, right? So there are a lot of obstacles there, and maybe the flexible Vanpool model, where it's, you know, using your device that you're very comfortable with and probably can't live without at this point, maybe that takes those barriers down. So, you know, we will be in contact with you guys. I'm sure there will be opportunities to get your input on the flexible Vanpool development with Nick and his team, because at the end of the day, if Nick is making something that you guys don't really want to use, that's just an opportunity missed. So I would welcome you guys to reach out to us, give your feedback on that program and anything else that you guys have heard today, because that's why we have these meetings, is to hear from you what you guys need, because DC is such a unique vanpooling community in that there's well over 70 vendors, right? Where a place like King County, there's one, and they don't have any more, but they had 1,600 vans. LA, there's one vendor. Houston, there's one vendor, right? So there's a lot of choices here, right? And so what works for other people might not work for other people, but you know, this diverse kind of very free market type vanpooling system that we have here is unique, and it's great. And I'm very glad to be the program manager for Vanpool Alliance and working for you guys, because it's unique. It's who used to be in Joe's position was a guy named Charles Steigerwald, and he always called this program the Rainbow Unicorn, because FTA doesn't know how to deal with us, because they're like, well, you know this. And I was like, well, actually we have 52 different vendors. And they're like, so, you know, kudos to you guys for being part of this program. And yeah, I think from there we can kind of open it up to general comments or questions to the group. Don't be shy. This is, you know, we only have these twice a year, so you only get one more shot this entire year. So let's hear from
this is Sharon again. So we're going to be I'm definitely going to be sending you a corresponding email to say whether or not I'm interested in the app, the mobile app thing, because it's not online yet, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, just want to make sure, because I think that is good, because instead of I usually pick up slug, because sometimes I only have 2 riders, and instead of riding local, if I want to ride in the HOV, I'll go in the slug line back then and get someone so I can jump on the HOV. So the only difference to me now is now that I'm going to get paid for that, picking up that person. So I'm all in for that.
Not bad for your pocketbook, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, I was just going to say that if anybody wanted to kind of get a feel for how the dynamic ride matching works, you could download the Carpool Now app, which we have implemented, and that's more for carpool situations, but it'll kind of give you the look and feel, or the, you know, how the whole thing works. So if whether you're a driver or a passenger, and that'll, you know, that's kind of something that we're going to build off of that to basically get to the Vanpool portion. So if folks want to try that out, it'll work both on Android and Apple. So either one.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I think that's kind of what you're using your base as, is that Carpool Now application.
Right.
Yeah. So check that out. I think Bonnie just put it in the chat if you guys want to look at that. we got some stuff going on in the chat. I had someone DM me, is there any statistics about percent of van pools that have gone out of business? Just curious. So yes, we absolutely have that data. We have had 4 or 5 vendors go out of business. Only one of them was a larger vendor. Most of them have been, they go into work, they create an LLC to make a van pool company for their trip to work. So they had 1 van. We had one vendor who folded, who had 25 vans. So out of 50, I think at our peak, we're at like 54, 55 vendors. That's not entirely terrible given how awesome this year has been. The good thing though is that we've had several people return to Vanpool Alliance and they've started their own Vanpool companies with pretty awesome names. Coyote Vans, Helltown Vans. That'll get your attention, right? I have other stuff in the chat here. Is it possible to see all the speakers' contact info? Does any speaker here not want that to happen? Let me know after the meeting and I'll kind of send out everyone's as they want. But Chris, you've already said yes, and you put your stuff down there. Brian has put his stuff down there. So it's on the last 2 guys, Nick and Dan. There it is. So any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
Hi, Linda Jack, Van Busters. Good evening.
Hey, Linda.
Can everyone hear me? Hi.
Sure can.
Open question for whomever. Is there any discussion with the commuter lots getting maybe cameras installed? I've had a lot of theft lately on some of my vans. And I didn't know if that was something that DDOT was looking into, in particular 610 Stafford Borough off of Garrisonville Road.
Bonnie has kind of looped me in on this. So you're talking about your catalytic converters getting cut off?
Correct.
And from what I hear, you have 2 on each vehicle, which just seems doubly painful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's a grab and go. So, you know, they're cutting with a saw or whatever, and it's doing more than just the damage and taking out the catalytic converters. There's also an electrical issue on one of my Ford E350s, and that's what they're taking. They're hitting the Ford E350s first because they have the 2 catalytic converters. I'm told the Chevys do not, and a majority of my Vanpools have converted over to Chevrolets, but the few Fords I have, they've hit. And one repair thus far, I'm at $4,000. So
yeah, Linda, I mean, unfortunately, this is a long running issue. I have probably lost a good amount of gray brain cells and years off my life from driving vans around with the catalytic converters cut off that sound like NASCARs, but you know, they're not something you really want to be driving. But all joking aside, this is something where my suggestion would be put it in writing, send it to Ben. We will make sure that it finds its way to the town of Stafford, the county of Stafford, the state police. We can always lean on people to do more drive-throughs. And certainly, you know, this would not be the first time that someone has asked VDOT to put cameras and stuff at lots. You know, the short, immediate answer is, you know, which probably doesn't help you any, is that this is the advantage of trying to find a Walmart, a Target, or something like that, where you can potentially park the van if there's a rash of this going on, at least in the short term, because they're going to have surveillance, whereas you know, 610 does not. But certainly the preponderance of information, if you can give it to us, we will make sure that it gets to the people that it needs to get to, and maybe a drip, drip, drip will, over time, these things will happen.
Okay, we can do. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just want to say that I don't work at VDOT, but I'm a contractor for VDOT, so I can pass the word to VDOT about that problem with the parking ride lots. I'm sure they are aware of it. I can do this.
James.
Appreciate that.
Anything else?
Ben, I received a question directly. Will the slides be shared after the meeting?
100%. I'll send all the slides out. I'll send contact information out. And then, you know, the recording of this actual thing so you can hear all this great content back if you so choose. In closing, I thank Chris, Nick, Brian, and Dan for speaking at this. It's been greatly appreciated. You guys brought a lot of great content. I think this has been very helpful for folks. I also want to take a second and just give another shout out to that survey at the last end of my slide for DRPT. Prince William County and Fairfax transit improvements. Take that survey. I think it probably only takes 10 minutes. And I want to take a second to shout out Denise and Bonnie for their great work during this pandemic. It literally, this program is here because of them and their hard work. So everyone should give them a round of applause.
It doesn't work so well virtually, does it? It's very
Doesn't really. But as is all, everyone here deals with Bonnie and Denise when they have questions, concerns, don't know what to do, or Bonnie and Denise get in contact with you because they have questions and concerns, and usually it's sorted out amicably and we get you guys paid. So I'm happy that they are great employees, and long may that continue. Do not leave. Does anyone have anything else? Otherwise, we will end this call.
I just very quickly just want to say thanks to everybody, all the vendors and everything. You know, I get that it's 7 o'clock on a Thursday night and everyone's probably got a list as long as mine of stuff that they'd rather be doing. But this type of thing only exists because you guys are involved in it. We hope that you think that we bring a value and not just beyond, you know, the checks that show up at your house. We want you to see us as, you know, something that hears your problems, your issues and your ideas. And we've had good ideas here and we will run with them. And who knows, they might end up as a commuter choice grant, just like they have done in the past. So thank you for your participation, and we're always here to help you guys in any way that we can.
Thank you, everyone.
Great program, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be in contact. Take care.
Thank you, guys.